Hi there. We can trust no one but ourselves. The safety nets that supported us and our lives and our way of life for many years are no more. And that means that we're in an ethical, a moral, and a political vacuum. What were the safety nets? One was free healthcare, an NHS that worked. No matter how poor you were, something happened to you, you could get to a doctor quickly. I spent a lot of my childhood getting seen quickly and stitched up from falls, antibiotics for infections, treatment delivered in a timely manner for serious illnesses, and doctors and nurses who seemed to know their trade and were often compassionate and took the time to explain. They cared about who you were. That's gone, mostly gone. A 2 or 3 tier health system that we now inhabit, and if you don't have money, you can die waiting for an appointment. I nearly did a few years back. I needed surgery. In the end, I paid because I wanted to live. 2 years later, I got a call from the NHS saying they could treat me now. I would have been dead at least a year. There's nothing unusual about this. It's an everyday story. Another safety net was education. It was an important safety net for every newborn child. You were guaranteed, at the very least, a basic education so that you would become literate, numerate, have a grounding in science, and at the very least, a rudimentary grasp of history. And that meant you could live a fuller life. You could read and think and better yourself. You were employable. You had a sense of the culture you came from, of who you were. But education has been dumbed down so that this net is evaporating. Identity politics that obfuscate race and gender to a point of utter confusion. History reduced to a catalogue of victims and oppressors. The obliteration of facts and events. This prepares us not for life, but to enter a matrix, a never land divorced from the harsh and wonderful realities of the world. Politics as a safety net is gone. For all its pitfalls and drawbacks and limitations and corruptions, a parliamentary democracy in which the individual vote mattered, a sense that there were some people in public life who cared more about policy than power, more about people than power, all gone. We have a crop of people who are career politicians, who are only interested in their own careers and short-term power grabbing, and who will follow any ludicrous woke war cry that hoves into view. Public figures are now at best not trusted, and rightly so, and at worst despised. The political class is now our enemy. The political class lives in a cloud cuckoo land of power grabbing, and has lost touch with not just with their own citizens, but with the way the world is. Politics in democratic countries as a flawed but invaluable safety net is gone. And it may backfire. The globalists think they run the world, but numerous countries like China, India, Iran, Russia, South American countries, South Africa, will have something to say about that. The world is no longer a dog on a leash to the United States. Countries can no longer be bullied into submission. America can no longer police the world. It can no longer control Israel. And if it simply wants more war because war makes money, at some point that could backfire horribly as the new emerging world order says enough is enough. The safety net of law and order is gone. We have a police force and a judicial system that is running scared. Scared of being called racist or Islamophobic, scared of doing their jobs because they are caught in a woke web of doolally thinking that says the world is simply full of victims and oppressors and that no one has to take responsibility for themselves. And where recently the Black Lives Matter campaign to defund the police was actually taken seriously by people. The church is no longer a safety net. Whether or not you are or were a religious person or a practicing Christian, you were nevertheless born into a Christian nation in which the English landscape was reassuringly peppered with churches, from old village churches to Westminster Cathedral and St. Paul's. Even if you didn't go in them, they were part of the furniture. They were an architectural comfort, with graveyards that told stories of the departed. Churches are often beautiful to look at, and priests who, at their best, offered something different to secular figures. They were a reminder that life wasn't just about grind and work and money and difficulty, but that we as human beings had an inner life that mattered and sometimes needed shepherding and counsel. The church pervaded everything: music, education, the very language. I went to a church school when I was a little boy, and I loved things like the Harvest Festival Parade. I also fell in love with the language of the Old Testament. It's complicated, poetic, and dense. It's trying to get at something. There's a musicality and beauty to the Psalms, the Song of Solomon, the parables. And if you compare the Song of Solomon or the Lord's Prayer to the mindless, banal repetition of Allah Akbar, God is great, you can see the difference just in the language. Because the mosque is replacing the church, and mosques are often ugly things. Christian priests become quieter or babble woke cliches, while imams become louder in their often overtly political bluster. As priests become more afraid to be priests, imams become more powerful and louder. Some talk about how Islam can deliver election victory. Recently, an imam told his congregation that Muslims can swing at least 50 seats in the UK in the next election. That's almost a guarantee of electoral victory. And he even boasted that they won't even need to vote Labour because they can have independent Muslim candidates. And we know how it works. Like most racial and cultural groups, Muslims live in the same areas. And everyone in the family in a household votes how the patriarch tells them to. That might be 10 votes per household. You only need 10 streets or 2 housing estates where that happens to be on a winning streak. So much for freedom of thought, but then Islam is not known for that. There's another safety net gone in the media. At one time, perhaps naively, we thought that fundamentally mainstream news was well researched and journalists would try to discover and deliver the truth. Those days are long gone. We know that the political class, and that includes, of course, mainstream media, have an agenda designed to keep us uninformed and easily manipulated. News is now propaganda. Investigative journalism now exists only among independents working outside mainstream media. The speaker at the recent World Economic Forum said, "We used to own the news and decide what was important. Now we don't." Think of that phrase, own the news. What a telling remark, as if knowledge about what really happens in the world is a product to be owned and shaped according to a political agenda. So, teachers can't teach, Christian preachers can't preach, police officers can't police, and doctors can't treat, politicians can't represent our interests, and journalists don't do journalism. So all the safety nets are gone, and the only people we can trust are ourselves. If you like this video, do please share and subscribe. Thank you.